Hi guys, it's Colleen again. I am here with Rachel and Davis Carman, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their homeschooling experience and I guess their programs or their classes for the homeschool convention. So to start out, if you can tell us a little bit about you guys and your family and what made you start homeschooling.
Sure. So I'll tell us a little bit about our family, and then Rachel can tell us a little bit about how we got started on this journey. But we've been married 38 years. We finished our homeschooling journey of 26 years in May of 22. We have 7 children, and our last one graduated 2 years ago. We have 2 boys on the front end, 2 boys on the back end, and I like to say 3 girls tucked safely in the middle. So those are our kids, ages 33 down to 20. We have 8 grandchildren with number 9 due in May. So the
Woo!
family's growing and they're leaving the nest and doing all those good things. So that's a little bit about the Carman family. So Rachel, you can tell folks a little bit about how we got started in this homeschooling journey.
Yeah, so that's actually a super long story to get all the details, but I'll try to keep it brief. And that is that I made fun of you people. I did not want to homeschool at all. God and his goodness literally went before us and paved the way by introducing us initially when I had just given birth to number 1 to our first homeschool family. They were neighbors of ours. I gave birth, and in a very neighborly fashion, she brought dinner over. And Davis went the next day to return the dish. And I said, so what are they like? I had not even met them yet. I mean, those are bygone days when neighbors are that involved. Anyway, he comes back and he goes, they homeschool their kids. I don't even know what that means, but that's what they do. And so I have to say, even from the beginning, I was like, what's that about? So we lived there for 3 years, and 5 of the women on that street home educated their children. And I just was like, I hope that works for you. That is not for me. And we moved away, and we so concerned about our son's education that we purchased a house in what was supposed to be the best school district. See, we cared about his education, but still not even remotely considering doing home education at all, because he was very strong-willed, and the 2 of us clashed just a little bit because so is his mother. And I was really excited about putting him on the bus every day. I fully admit and confess I was looking forward to just having a great party when he was gone, which sounds terrible, but just, in a theme of being honest. And so, long story super, super short, he was put on no bus one day and the wrong bus the next day. I mean, there's something going on here, right? I mean, I was just push and push and push, and we need time apart from each other, which is a lie that a lot of women really believe, that they really need to be away from their children. And I would just propose, I think the stronger you feel like you need to be away from them, it might mean that you really actually need to be with them and work that through with the help of God. And that's certainly what happened to me. So he stayed in the system for 13 days, but it was killing him. I mean, it was killing his curiosity and his passion. He was coming home sort of dragging his backpack behind him. And here's this kid just full of life and energy and curious about a lot of things. Favorite place to be was out in the woods, investigating everything. And I would ask him what he did at school, and he would just go, nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. I mean, he wasn't happy. Of course, his brother missed him terribly. So Davis went to check out what was going on. Maybe we're missing something, right? And I'm at home feverishly trying to find an alternative to the best public school. So I've got him on waiting lists to be interviewed for private schools. I'm thinking, we'll just mortgage the house. I'm just thinking, we'll figure this out. So he comes home with him, much to my terror, brings Charles home. And I'm just like, woo. So we drove around town, interviewing, putting him on kindergarten waiting lists, because I wasn't even thinking about homeschool. We finally get home. And all of the kids are in the car in those glory days of parenting when they're all like stuck in the car because they're all in car seats, right? And they were asleep because they were exhausted. And Davis and I are in the kitchen. So we've got the garage door open. The kids are in, taking a nice nap, and we've got the everything's safe.
Right.
And he goes, "How do you feel?" And I was like, I'm just discouraged. I mean, there's not an open kindergarten spot for our son, and all. And I went, okay, let me get this straight. You get to go to work all day and I get stuck at home with the kids. Is that what you're suggesting? I mean, isn't that beautiful? I mean, that submission and that consideration of the will of God. Just anyway, he said, all I know is that we've been praying for our son. And what if you're the teacher we've been praying for our son to have? Or just like, oh, okay, then. So it was like the Holy Spirit spoke through my husband to say the very thing that, I didn't want to hear.
Right.
And that's how we started. That's how we started our journey. And we started it like a lot of people start it, 1 year at a time. We'll just see if we can both survive this. And God just came and did an amazing work. He just knitted our hearts together. He taught me so much. He tore away things in me. I was still doing that, right? Selfishness, inflexibility, impatience, all of those things that I didn't even know that I was suffering so terribly from. He's just peeled back and peeled back. And so then we started not just becoming a homeschool family, we stepped right into the crazy lane, and now we advocate for it. And now we own a curriculum company. So, I mean, it's truly a story of God just intervening in our lives in ways that we can't account for other than his goodness to us.
Yeah, it's amazing how whether you
And
want
one of
it
the
or
things I'll
not,
add,
it needs to happen. Because I was in the same boat you were. I was not going to be a stay-at-home mom. I was not going to homeschool. And I had a career. I guess I still have it technically, but and basically my grandma was living with us and got sick, and I was her main caregiver, and we still didn't homeschool. The kids went to school. I was a part of their school life. Like I went to school with, and did the parent, involvement part. But it wasn't until COVID, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's because of COVID." And I was like, "Well, no, actually it really had nothing to do with that. It's because I figured out exactly they're not being pushed, they're not being taught as much as I could do it. And during COVID, I was doing it anyway. So I'm like, well, if I can, because I was kind of in the same boat you were. They need time away from me.
Yep.
I can't, you know what I mean? I don't have the patience, and I don't. Patience is the one virtue God did not grant me, even though I'm really good with kids. Everybody laughs because they're like, "You were really good with kids." I said, "Yeah, with kids." For one, not my own kids, and two, not adults. Like I have no patience with adults. And even to this day, I can admit that wholeheartedly. My grandpa used to tease me about it. He goes, "God gave you a lot of gifts and patience wasn't one of them." I was like, "Nope, it wasn't."
Yeah.
and one of the things I'll add to the story is that at the end of that first year, we actually went to our first homeschool conference in North Carolina. But again, we weren't sure we were going to homeschool a second year, but being at that conference turned a light bulb on for us. And we drove back 90 minutes talking the whole way about how this could change everything for our marriage, our parenting, obviously the education of our kids. And we were actually pretty excited about just rethinking things that second year, feeling the freedom, putting our own mark on it, setting our own goals. And of course, like Rachel said, the second year was tremendously better. By the third year, we're writing educational philosophies. And by the fourth year, we are fully committed, even though we don't have a clue what high school is going to look like.
Yeah, I'm in that boat right now. My son is a freshman, and that last year was a very interesting year for me because I didn't know what we were doing for high school, but he didn't want to go back because we've kind of taken it. I always kind of took it 1 year at a time, you know what I mean? If the kids really wanted to go back, but now we're almost to the point that that isn't even an option. They don't want to go back, and I won't send them back to our local high school. Like if they chose that they wanted to go back, it would be a whole different school system because of things that have happened. Because like my nieces and nephews still go to that school system. I teach well, not teach, but I'm a youth leader. I have kids all the time come in and tell me how much they don't like our school system. It's not, they're not learning anything. They're not being helped. They're not being supported. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I homeschool. I'm like, there's the big keys, exactly why I homeschool. So, and yeah, I mean, again, kind of like we've said on a numerous amounts of calls, back when you started with your son, homeschooling was not something anybody really thought about. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
very few families. It was, oh, okay, you do that. Because we had a homeschool family in our area that I grew up in. But again, honestly, I don't even remember. I think it was because they rode horses and my parents, we had horses. So like, you know what I mean? They were in that circle, but they weren't in the school circle, and nobody, you know what I mean? Nobody really knew how to deal with them. So it was kind of one of those, but I mean, like in grade school, I was sick constantly. I'd get a week worth of homework and be able to finish it in 6 hours. Well, that's what my kids love about, well, I can get my homework done in 4 hours a day or do all of it and then have the week free to do other stuff that I want to do, go on field trips, you know what I mean? But all their work is still done. They're not missing anything. They're just time appropriating things a whole lot better than going to
Right.
school constantly. And most of that is not learning. It's going from one class to another. It's eating lunch. It's, like PE. PE is great. My kids still get PE every day. And it's not you know what I mean? It's not, oh, well, it has to be this half an hour chunk of time that you do nothing for, but that for 30 minutes. I mean, everybody laughs, but I babysit. I run up and down stairs constantly. I lift car seats. Everybody's like, well, do you exercise? I was like, yeah, I get exercise every day. Thank you. Having kids is exercise. Believe me, if you're not doing it, if you're not getting exercise and having kids, you're doing something wrong. Like, so, well, I'm glad, obviously, I'm glad that you guys have made it this far and that it's been, for one, the experience that it's been, because since we started homeschooling, a lot of our church has questioned me, you know what I mean? And how has it been? How can you do this? I said it's really not as hard as people think. I said especially now with the internet and being able to talk to other people, being able to get a hold of other people. I mean, Facebook groups, just Zoom calls, you know what I mean? You're not as alone as, again, like when 20 years ago, you were kind of on your own. The internet was not really as big. You know,
Well, and just to give you some stats to kind of show that, when we started homeschooling in 1996, there were 10,000 homeschool students in North Carolina and 100,000 private school students. Today, in 2024, there are 200,000 homeschool students and 110,000 private school students. So there's almost twice as many homeschool students as private school when, 28 years ago, we literally were a minority where we were off the radar in so many ways. Many people didn't even know another homeschool family, whereas today, everybody knows another homeschool
Yep.
family.
Everybody knows at least one homeschool family, if not two or three. And most of the time, they'll tell you, well, your kids are doing well, they're well educated, they're well mannered. You know what I mean? Because a lot of, and I mean, again, I hate to say this, but a lot of the time, I think the homeschool stigma was, well, your kid needs extra help or they have a disability that the school couldn't handle. So and that may be why you started for a lot of people, but in today's, like, both of my kids, there's nothing wrong, you know what I mean? If anything, they were kind of on the same thing as your first child. They were bright, they wanted to be curious, and got told at school, sit there and be quiet, don't ask questions. Well, okay, yeah, I don't agree with that. Like, in my opinion, you should ask as many questions as you can come up with because that's how you learn. And so discouraging that really kind of irritated me. And then, like I said, when COVID hit, it became very, very evident very quickly that, yeah, this is not the way I want my children's education to continue. And like you said, going to a convention really opens your eyes about what all is out there, that there is a community that, because when I started, luckily one of my friends had already done it with her kids. So she had gotten into all these groups and is like, here's a list. Have fun. So, okay, the other side of that question is, did you ever really, I know you said taking it one year at a time, but did you ever really truly consider quitting?
No, I've told the story before that, people say, surely at one point you thought about putting the kids on the bus. I mean, you're so in love with the idea of putting your kids on the bus. Surely you did think about that. And I said, no, but I thought about getting on the bus. I figured I could get on the bus and just go for a ride and I would be better. We really, and I can't account for that. It was never a discussion, even after the first year, so we went to the conference in May after our first year. So I think probably that cut off the chance of any negotiations or conversations, but we never considered putting them on. And I think that's kind of probably an exceptional experience, but we got into it and we just went full bore. We sort of drove a stick in the ground and this is what we're doing and this is what we're about. And we really didn't look back. I think that might be though a generational thing. I think that was more common back when we were coming in. Today, I think we see much more year to year than we did back then.
Well, like I said, I started year to year because I didn't want to force the kids to do something if they really weren't enjoying, you know what I mean? Because honestly, I think being sure of yourself is part of the problem to some degree too. If you're not sure as a parent or as their teacher, then they're not sure whether but I don't know that I can honestly say we would go back. Like I said, if they truly wanted to, like the conversation would have to, we'd have a conversation, but really they don't want to go back. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? They have had no, even when we've struggled, we've just, okay, well, then we need to stop. We need to readjust, figure out, you know what I mean, why we're having such a problem or what the problem is so we can fix it. And we've moved on. So, okay, well, I'm glad that you guys didn't either, like, because I kind of wondered whether, you know what I mean, like there was more people that did kind of have that feeling or not, because that was actually one of the questions I asked if anybody had questions, and that was one of their questions is if you'd ever felt like quitting. And I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, well, no, not really. Like once I decide I'm going to do something, I kind of stick to it, even if it, drags me through the mud.
Well, and it doesn't mean that there weren't really, really hard days. And
Oh yeah,
I also have said before, there were hard days that turned into hard weeks, that turned into hard semesters, that turned into hard years, right? I mean, there are a couple of years that I mean, I was sucking water. I was like on week 2 in May, right? And that's not because we just started. It's because I didn't make any progress. There
right.
were just so many life issues, so many character issues, and me and them and us. And it happens, right? So it doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. It
Well, I
just,
was gonna say, yeah, it's definitely
yeah.
not easy per se, but it's, in my opinion, it's easier than dealing with teachers, principals, other
Mhm.
kids that don't really, I don't want to say don't care, but don't have the outlook of your child as their main priority. You know what I mean? That has always been my thought, because like I got into it with the school system during COVID. Before that was part of the reason why, is because Jake went from a straight A student. My grandma got sick, was home on hospice when school started. Well, I informed the school in no uncertain terms. This is what's going on. Please let me know if there's, like, I have been super involved. He's been a straight A student. Well, that was when COVID hit and they sent him home with computers, and 90% of the work wasn't being turned in according to them. Well, okay, I had grandma, like, I had a million things, his schoolwork, and because I knew he was turning it in, you know what I mean? Like, I know my son, I know what he was doing and what he was capable of. Well, yeah, it came down to, it was an electronic issue. The computer was, he was turning them in, but it wasn't getting to the other end to the
Oh,
teacher.
wow.
Well, you know what I mean? I'm like, I know you don't know him. This is his first year. It's sixth grade. Like, we switched schools, but I said, how exactly does a straight A student go to almost failing and you
Mhm.
don't question anything but him? I
Yeah.
said, sorry, that doesn't fly with me. So we
Mm.
went in, like, I got him, we went in, had to sit down with all these teachers. Well, about a week later, the principal called me and said, your son is not the only one. He goes,
Mhm.
we started looking into it. This is not a just him problem. This is a across the board. A lot of kids are not. And he goes, I actually had, because at that point they had brought, if you wanted to go back, you could. If you didn't, you stayed home. Well, my
Mhm.
kids didn't want to wear masks, so we didn't go back. Well, he brought one of the students in and had him turn it in his office, walked up to the teacher, and it never showed up. And I said, yeah, see, so failing my son is not, I said, but how many parents came in and complained about this? I said, that's the point. I am super active. I said, the fact that my attention has been off, I explained this, but why did we wait till literally the end of the first semester before anybody messaged me, anybody called me? You know what I mean? It's grading period ending, and now we're all worried about his grades. Well, that should have happened like 2 or 3 weeks in. You saw that he wasn't turning things in. Well, why is that? You know what I mean? What's the problem? Not 6 weeks later, and there's nothing we can do about it. So, yes, I wholeheartedly agree. It's not easy, but it's definitely easier than dealing with outside people that don't have your son's or your daughter's best interest at heart. So,
Well, like you're saying, nobody cares about your children more than you as the parent. And you actually know them better as well. And part of what happens when you homeschool, by spending that additional time with your kids, uh, a lot of people think that's going to be hard, but you actually can get to know them better, understand what they're interested in, what makes them tick, get their heart to fall in love with God and with family and siblings. And then you can actually direct them and customize their education to places that are much more interesting and exciting to them because
right.
you care about them and you know them and you've basically given your heart to them and they've given your heart to you.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a lot easier for correction or discipline as well, because if they mouth off, like my son does not hardly ever mouth off. Well, if he woke up, you know what I mean? Or if something's going on, it's a whole lot easier conversation instead of, well, I have no clue what went on for the last 8 hours at school. So you come home and mouth off, you're now in trouble. Okay, well, it's more, what's the problem? What can we do, to solve it? That's not an acceptable, way to express yourself, but let's figure out a better way to help you express yourself and get everybody back on the same page. Because yeah, at school that used to drive me nuts. Like you said, come home, what'd you do? Nothing. Really? You did nothing for 8 hours. Then why are we sending you to school? Like, really? So no, I totally agree. So I guess the next question would be the classes you've offered or are offering, and times, if you can give a little more about like why somebody or what somebody might gain from coming to your classes.
Okay, Davis, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Sure, I'll go ahead and go ahead.
Okay.
So on Thursday at 6:30 p.m., I'm doing a keynote workshop entitled "Give Me One Good Reason to Homeschool." So if you're coming to this conference because you're saying, okay, I don't want to do this, but if you give me a really good reason, I might consider it, then this is the workshop for you to come to. Or if you just started and you're not feeling like you got solid ground under your feet and you need just a little confidence booster, this is going to give you 10 of the hundreds of reasons that I could give folks. I wrote a blog article years ago with a list of 77 reasons to homeschool. I just threw a whole bunch of them out there. But in this one, I'll give some of the top 10 reasons that you need to consider or that are really good reasons. Now, I'll give one spoiler right now, and that is that the most valuable diploma that exists right now is a homeschool high school diploma. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an advocate or a proponent or because I homeschooled my kids. I know firsthand, watching my kids leave our homeschool, leave our home, and go into jobs and college, that the most valuable diploma is a homeschool high school diploma. People are recruiting homeschoolers because they make good employees, they make good students, they use their time intentionally, they manage it well, they stay out of trouble as a general rule, and they're serious about life and about what is their next step. But that's I'll give you a whole bunch of age ranged reasons for young kids, middle of the road, and the high school years and beyond. But yeah, that's Thursday. Then Friday, I got a workshop entitled What We Believe, a Biblical Worldview of Education at Home. So it's kind of going to be an in-depth look at one reason to homeschool, and that is all the valuable things that happen by doing it at home. If you were to take a blank piece of paper and say, okay, let's try and design the ideal school situation. And you look at pros and cons and data and evidence and student development and all this, what you would find yourself designing and building would be a family at a home setting. That is the ideal context. It's a little bit of what we were talking before. As parents, you care about the well-being of your kids more than anybody ever will. You're going to have a lifetime relationship with these graduates, and you know them better than anybody else. You know, you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool mom. And so when a mom is a homeschool teacher, she knows if a student's being lazy or doing their best. They know, they know if they're being challenged appropriately or pushed hard enough or need a little extra nudge, or maybe they just need a hug. But I'll go into a lot more reasons and the positives of why teaching your children at home can help instill a biblical worldview and why that's important. And then Saturday, I will have a packed house in the workshop of dating, courting, and marriage prep. This one has never been anything but standing room only. And I have learned a lot through the years by trial and error, by mistakes and successes. People want to know, what are some ways to help your kids navigate these choppy waters these days? It is not easy for 20-year-olds to look for or find or figure out how to navigate the dating, the courting, and the marriage prep. And a lot of folks aren't even thinking about that in their 20s. They're waiting until they're in their 30s. And I would make a case that the scripture talks about blessed is the man who, marries a wife in his youth. I'm rejoicing in the wife of my youth. But there are things to consider in terms of what do you want in life? And it's not just a career. A family is something a young person should want to have a vision for. But it begins by doing the dating, courting, and marriage prep in a wise, careful way with good advice and good counsel and parents to help along the way. So I'll be sharing a lot of there in that course. And there's almost always lots of questions afterwards. I'll be glad to answer those when that workshop is over, because a lot of time, most of the time, people are going through real life situations right then and there. And if their specific question isn't answered, then they'll come and ask me, at the end of the workshop, and I'll be glad to help. But, the thing Rachel and I have learned is parenting is hard work. It really does take a lot of sacrifice of time, money, energy. And sometimes when the kids are young, you feel like you're training the same thing over and over and over again just to teach simple obedience. But then when they leave the nest and they become young adults and they're making their own decisions, the hardest part about parenting then is that they're free agents. They have their own free will. And unfortunately, we all have a sinful nature. And so we can't force things to happen anymore. We can't spank them soundly and tuck them into bed and, tell them to stay in bed. They have to figure it out. We can offer advice. We can hope that they will ask for advice. But these are bigger decisions when they're looking at who to marry. And that can be a decision that shapes the course of their life for the good or for the bad. And so you want to help them desire to go a wise path and get some wise counsel along the way. So that's what we'll be talking about Saturday.
Okay, so I've got my workshops here on my phone. So I didn't write down all the times, but apparently on Friday, I had the keynote entitled In This Moment. And the whole point of this presentation is to talk about how in the middle of this chaotic, confusing moment that we find ourselves in culture, It's very easy, I know it is for me, to wish, man, Little House on the Prairie looks really great about right now, or maybe the 80s, right? And yet God in his sovereignty has put us in this moment. This is our moment. And so I'm going to give some biblical examples of other people who've been in really tough moments in the timeline of history. And then I'm going to zero in on one character and how did he handle his moment, right? And look at some of the surrounding circumstances and his response. And then I want to challenge us in our moment with things that we can do really well based on God's goodness and focusing on him. Then I have 3 other workshops. One is entitled, What About That Child? And I don't know that we need to even talk about that very much, because if you've got one, you know you do. If you don't, if you're not sure you have one, you don't. That's the child that makes you want to just run from the building. You pull out all the hairs out of your head. It can be for a variety of different reasons. It can be anything. And I mean, I can say this, we did not have any children that were truly debilitated with any kind of learning issues. I mean, we had dyslexia and we had some auditory processing issues going on, but I know people who've got really debilitating learning issues going on. We did not have that, but I've had those people as well as people who have children with physical challenges. When I talk about that child, it can be anywhere on that. It can be behavioral, it can be emotional, it can be adopted, it can be any of those things that weigh so heavily on that kid that they have a very difficult time processing life and school, right? And they're in this intersection with, sometimes it's prepubescent, sometimes it's they come out of the chute that way. They child, because I find that that child is often, I've heard it so many times that moms will say, I am not going to homeschool that child. I kind of think that child is the number one reason you need to homeschool. And so that's what we're going to talk about in that workshop. And that's usually packed, is, you know, everybody's got one or knows one. And so come, let's hold hands and encourage each other. Then I have Mary, Martha, you and me. Mary, Martha, we know them from scripture. There's 2 resonant times that we see them in the passage of scripture. We see the first time we meet them when Mary is at the feet of Jesus and Martha's in the kitchen, right? And then the second time that we meet them that's so notable is upon the death of Lazarus. And so we're going to look at their 2 stories, their personality profiles, and then I want to talk about how we can apply those 2 women, their perspectives, their the positions that they took with Jesus, the things they said to Jesus, and how can we learn from that. And then finally, one of my all-time favorites, it's got a super long title, Attention Obsessive Compulsive Perfectionist Control Freaks, Chill Out. And so over the years, we spent 12 years as board members on our state homeschool group. And then we've spoken across the country and even around the world. I mean, we've spoken on homeschool issues in Japan, the Philippines, Russia, Germany, Kenya, all across everywhere. What I have found is it is very often the case that the reason that women quit is because they think they have to do it all. And they don't just have to do it all. They have to do it all perfect.
Right.
And they carry around this burden of being behind. And so we're going to talk about all of that in this session. And I'm going to suggest that the key to homeschooling success is chilling out. And so we're going to talk about how to actually do that. So that's my lineup for the conference.
Okay. And yeah, basically that's what I'm asking for, is because I went to my first conference last year and you get the whole list and you're trying to read through and trying to, you know what I mean, figure out,
That's so
and
much.
sometimes not understanding what is even being talked about, you know what I mean? Reading the blurb and having somebody explain it is 2 different things. And I think for a lot of people, that was my big goal when I got asked to do this job, was to make it easier for people to choose to understand what they might want to learn about, as well as, because no offense, but talking to you guys versus maybe talking to somebody else, they might click more with that other person than
Sure.
you, or vice
Yeah.
versa. And you know what I mean? The whole idea of this conference is to get as much knowledge given to you as possible. So yeah, if you can go, oh, well, I really like listening to them. I want to hear what they have to say versus, yeah, that other speaker maybe sounds good, but not kind of really what I want to listen to. So that was my big goal in this, was to encourage people to listen to them, and by them not being too long. Sometimes we get overly excited about this, but so the last thing real quick is, do you have any motto or phrase or tidbit that you kind of have, that you use or go by?
I like yours, Davis.
Well, I got two. So one is, if there was ever a time to homeschool, it's now.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID proved that. During COVID, all 60 million K through 12 students in the US had a mandatory trial run of home education.
Yep.
They, in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
And a lot of people realized, oh, this really is a little different than I thought. Maybe I will do it next year. Or maybe they always wanted to, but they didn't have the support. They got to do it for 2 months because they had to.
Yep.
And now everybody's like, wow, this is really good for our family. We actually should do this again. So that's one reason. And just everything leading up, or that's been happening since 2020, has
Mhm.
just pulled the curtain back to what's happening in the public school. You talked a lot about that already. And people are saying, whoa, I had no idea. I
Right.
can't do that.
Right.
So for those reasons, and all the available support, all the people that are doing it, you're part of a big, good, healthy community. If there was ever a time to homeschool and you miss it this moment, like Rachel said, in this moment, this is the time to homeschool. So that's one motto. But Rachel and I always finish our podcast called Let's Talk Homeschool with the saying that we are walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime. And that pretty well sums up our attitude towards what we did for 26 years and why we still enjoy encouraging families to start, to stay in the game, to finish all the way to high school, because this is the best thing for your family, for your kids, and you can do it. If there was ever time to do it, it's now.
Mhm.
I like that one. I was gonna say, mine is always smile. Like, I sign everything with smile. Like, that is my big thing, smile. The worst thing can help just by smiling at somebody. So I agree with that. The time is definitely now. If anybody, you can do it. No matter what your circumstances are, you can do it. I talked to somebody actually at the hospital when I was in there for my daughter, and she said that her kids were having problems, but she works full time. And I said, if you have a child old enough to watch them, I said, you don't have to school during the day. You can do it after you get home, and then you can help. But I said, a lot of it they can do on their own. You know what I mean? Again, depending on your age children, obviously everything is different depending on each child. But she goes, I may look into that. And I said, you really should, because I think if you're having that much problems, because she was all upset about something that had happened with her daughter at school again. And I said, yeah, at some point you can't keep going down the path and hitting the same brick wall. Like, you have to find another different path, or at least a new brick wall to hit, because otherwise everybody is just going to get frustrated and nobody is learning anything. So, but no, I appreciate your time. I will let you go, and I'll see you at the conference.
All right,
Sounds great.
thanks.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
See ya.